Hi everyone. Today you're going to be taking notes on biomes, so please go ahead and set up your paper for Cornell Notes. Your title is Biomes, and the essential question we are trying to answer today is how are biomes classified? So first we have to talk about what weather is and how weather and climate are different. So weather is the condition of the atmosphere at a specific place and time. Usually when we look at weather on the daily basis, and we know that weather can change within minutes or hours. It's very erratic and unpredictable. Well, it is predictable because we can predict it, but it can change at any time. Whereas climate is more of a long-term pattern. So it's overall if you took an average of all the weather patterns in an area, that's what the climate would be. And these two things change depending on what the latitude is. So, for example, if this is the Earth, here's the equator in the middle. And if you're closer to the middle, it's going to be hotter, right? Your weather and your climate are going to be warmer. Whereas if you're closer to the poles, it might be colder. And again, if we look here, if you look at temperature, right? And as temperature increases, we tend to see specific biomes like rainforests and deserts. And then average temperatures tend to be like a temperate rainforest or a grassland. And then the colder with less or colder temperatures are like the tundra, boreal forest, where there's not quite a lot of plants. So plants and animals have adapted to the climate of their biome. We see small changes in temperature and precipitation that can actually affect, right? So if you have a little bit of, for example, rain or a lot of snow, the type of plants you have there are going to be plants that are adapted to live there. Now, going back to this idea of latitude, which I kind of already touched on, if there are places that are closer to the equator, they're going to receive more sun because if you look at this curve of the Earth, which point of the curve is closest to the sun? Well, it would be this point right here on the equator, right? If you pretend that this is a C, this point here, this distance is shorter. So it receives more sun, it's closer to the sun. So areas that are closer to the equator tend to be warmer, and then areas that are closer to the North and the South Pole tend to be colder. And that's what this is saying here. Light from the sun strikes Earth more directly at the equator than the poles. Okay, so let's move on to talk about the land biomes. These are some of the major ones that we're going to look at. And again, remember that biomes are classified according to the plants that exist there, and the abiotic factors like climate, which include temperature, precipitation, and sunlight, as well as some wind. Now, the plants and the abiotic characteristics in a biome influence the types of animals that live there, so they go hand in hand. This goes back to the idea that abiotic factors affect biotic factors. So here are the 8 biomes that we would look at, and we've already done this. We've already colored in our map. So let's go ahead and talk about them. Okay, so let's start with the tundra. The tundra is a treeless biome with a layer of frozen soil, and this is what we call permafrost. Now, because there's a permafrost layer and there's a lot of frozen soil, the plants have adapted by developing shallow roots, and this is what a tundra would look like. A boreal forest is a band of dense evergreen forest and is also called the northern coniferous forest or a taiga. So boreal forest and taiga are the same thing. And here what we see is that summers are longer than tundra summers. And this is what it looks like. All right, so then we move on to number 3, which is a temperate forest. And this is composed mainly of like broadleaf plants and a lot of deciduous trees. Usually we'll see a lot of the trees that lose their leaves, and then these leaves go into the soil, so they make this soil very rich. And we also know that these forests have 4 seasons. And this is kind of what it looks like. You can see all the leaves on the ground. And then the fourth one is going to be a temperate woodland or shrubland. So woodlands are mixed shrub communities, and they are found in areas with less rainfall, sorry, than in temperate forests. So these forests tend to have less rain than these. And this is kind of what it looks like. So because there's less rain, there's less green. It's more shrubby. Okay, and then we move on to our temperate grasslands, which are characterized by fertile soils that can support thick cover of grasses. There is drought, so there's also a lot of grazing animals like bisons that kind of help keep the grasslands short, and they also help it not become a forest. And then we have a desert, which is really any area that's really, really hot. And there's not a lot of rain, so the evaporation exceeds the rate of precipitation. This just means it's way too hot, um, or hotter around the year, and there's very little rain. And then we have our tropical savanna, which is characterized by the grasses that are scattered in climates that receive less precipitation. Whoops, sorry. Than some other tropical areas. This is what it looks like. So it has a lot of trees and a lot of grasses, but there's not a lot of rain. So you'll normally see like dead grass like this, and then tall trees that are kind of scattered to spread around or to spread out to receive enough sunlight. And then last but not least, we have a tropical rainforest. So tropical rainforest is very different from a tropical savanna because it has way more trees. And this is actually the most diverse of all of the land biomes because it has so much rain and so many trees and so many plants that it can accommodate for many different types of animals or species. And the last terrestrial areas that we're going to look at are all the polar regions where it's really cold. So these are technically not considered true biomes because their masses it's ice, so it's not actual land, right? It doesn't have soil, but we still want to learn about them. So polar regions are cold all year long, and they're actually kind of in between a tundra, right? Like the tundras are just a little lower in latitude, and then the polar regions are really at the ends of the higher altitudes and or latitude, sorry, of the Earth. Now, those were all land biomes. We also have a couple marine ecosystems or biomes that we can look at, right? There's a lot of places in the water that exist, like the coastal ocean and coral reefs. All of those are, well, that's one biome, but all of that is like an ecosystem. And so we can also have freshwater biomes. So these are saltwater and these are freshwater biomes, like the wetlands and the estuaries. And the wetlands look, they're called wetlands because it's a lot of water, right? It's areas like marshes, swamps, bogs, that have so much water. They're saturated with water. And usually what we see is that the plants have adapted to live here by becoming aquatic plants. So basically they are used to having their roots drenched in water. Whereas there are other plants that if you drench in water, they actually get moldy and die. And then the last ones are the estuaries, which are also formed from where fresh water comes from. Usually, like a river or stream will merge with salt water and then they form estuaries. And these are also very diverse ecosystems because you have kind of like a blend of salt water nearby and fresh water. So it allows for different types of species to exist here. So this is it for our notes. If you guys can go ahead and put them away, we are going to add our questions and summary next class and make sure that if you missed anything, you go back to the video and you add it. You can go ahead and highlight any important information today. Otherwise, you guys are all done.